Hi, everybody. I'm Zach Holt from the city of Port Orchard. This is Darren Podraza, and we're going to talk a little bit today about utilizing UAVs or drones for regulatory compliance. You want to run the clicker for me?
Yeah.
So today we're hoping to go over a little bit of the basics. What is a UAV? What are UAVs? Can you use them for? How can they help you in different applications in the workplace? Talk a little bit about some typical inspections that we use these for. Probably ask some questions of the group to keep it interactive. We're going to talk a little bit then about how we justified the need for UAVs in our inspection program. Go into the details of putting a program together. Fairly high level. We'll have some stuff we can hand out. We have your email, so if anybody's interested, we can always distribute links and useful stuff like that for trainings and where to get certified and stuff like that if you guys do have an interest. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how adding these to our system has improved our processes and given us a little bit better deliverable to our customers. So you want to go first or you want me to go?
Yeah, I'm Darren Podraza. I am a GIS coordinator and a public works inspector for the city of Port Orchard. So that's sewer, water, storm, roads, right away, everything that a city does.
Make it sound simple, man. How many years you been doing it?
27 years.
There we go. I'm Zach Holt. My background is in environmental science. I've kind of ping-ponged all over the environmental world. Right now, I'm the city's Stormwater Watersheds Program Manager. My role with inspection is mainly support for Darren. I get enforcement when he needs it. I get him supplies when he needs them and offer field assistance as needed. As a program manager, I spend most of my time sitting behind desks. So it's always welcome when I get a call of, hey, you need to come see this. So yeah, so we're not blowing things up. This is not that kind of drone, folks. What we are doing is looking at infrastructure from a different perspective. And we're going to go into some details with that in a little while. Much different certification process there. So anybody here using these already in your field? Perfect, perfect. I expect dialogue, okay? Back and forth, guys. I was expecting a few more hands, actually.
Are they using them for stormwater or something else, other stuff besides stormwater?
Oh, nice.
Design? You doing topo with it or something? RTK drone? Okay.
Sweet. Nice.
It's a little bit more for flood control and project documentation.
Okay. So fairly similar to what we're using it for then.
Photos basically what's the distraction.
Perfect.
Sherry farm. Sherry farm.
We've
After storm, cow shit everywhere
oh man, I believe it.
in a residential area.
Nice. Oh yeah, so let's go into some of the basics. UAV stands for uncrewed or unmanned aerial vehicle. There are names for them all over the board. They're defined from Oxford as an unmanned aerial vehicle or unmanned aerial vehicles. For the purpose of this workshop, we're going to be calling them drones just to keep it kind of level playing field. But at the program level, we stick with UAV because that's how we've been communicating with decision makers in council. So why would you use them? This is a great oversight of one of our larger projects. We've got several this size in our jurisdiction now. This is only showing the front half of it. These things have really helped us streamline processes and procedures. It's nice to be able to fly the same path over time to be able to see if there have been any deviations or corrections that you can't see from the ground when you're walking sometimes because earth gets moved, etc. They move materials, pipes, anything like that. And one of the other things too, perspective wise, I've gone out on different job sites and looked out over a vegetated field. And when you're at the level of plane on there, that grass can look really green. But once you get that drone up above it, you can really see a difference on the spatial distribution of how the grass is set up. So it helps us a lot with determining if they've met the percent coverage to be able to use grass as a BMP. Recordings are really big for us too. A lot of it's photos just for, data size, because these files can get pretty heavy. Anybody that's worked with them before. I'm actually just now trying to move one to a thumb drive here to show at the end of this, and it's taken a half an hour. So, yeah, and it's not a long video either.
Yeah, if you don't shoot in 4K, we try to shoot in like 1080 to just make that a little easier. It's tempting to crank it up, get the resolution, but 1080 is pretty good.
Yeah.
Some of these sites, this isn't the one I'm thinking of, but some of our sites are like 100 acres and they're completely cleared, 4 ponds on them, stuff like that. So it's really nice. I try to keep it to like a 5-minute drone video with so I fly it fairly fast, get the whole site. But the idea behind the 5 minutes is I'm going to send out a Dropbox link and it'll have everybody on there. It may go to the Cecil, it may go to Ecology, it may go to the contractor. And so if you have somebody that's being difficult, when you start sending those links out, this is what we're seeing every week, right? And everybody's on there. You usually start getting some results.
In our experiences with, say, for example, code enforcement processes, when we have this information, it's all supplemental for Ecology if they're doing their separate enforcement. Because they didn't collect that information themselves. They tend to like to do their own thing. But this really gives them a good idea as to, I need to get out here right away, or
And
Okay, we're
the
scheduled.
condition of the ponds too. I mean,
Yeah.
you can see that from outer space.
So I started talking a little bit about how we had a bit of a divergence. He and I we were out doing an inspection one time, driving up to one of our bigger sites, and we ended up getting caught in the middle of an active manhunt. And the police were really upset with us. They're like, get your stuff out. Come on, you're gonna help us here. We're gonna find this guy. And there was this really weird jurisdictional disconnect because we're not trained officers, right? And they had nobody that could fly it. If they did, we could just hand it right over to them and let them use it. But since he was the only staff on hand at the time that was trained to do it, we didn't end up doing. They caught the person, but afterwards there was this big discussion internally of how they could have lined right down and made it a lot shorter of a manhunt finding this guy if they had their own system. So the chief said, do it. And they put their system online in parallel to ours. But like I said, here, they have a different mission than we do. So we want to make sure that we keep that divergence in place. Yes.
We've done the opposite. We had a landslide in a remote area that we couldn't access. So our police department has a drone. So they loaned us an officer with the drone to investigate the landslide.
Nice.
So we worked
And
together that way.
now that they have their own system, we could probably work like that, but not the other direction because we're not
Right.
enforcement officers.
Right, yeah, we've used, I think there's twice for remote areas that we just.
It
Yeah.
does work great where there's no access to, like, in the middle of rivers to
Yeah.
access over the top of it. They're great for that.
Yeah, we've even dabbled with trying to find ways to use them for emergency sample collection, but without putting it at risk, we haven't gone that far with it.
It's getting old now. It's kind of an old drone now.
Yeah, it's actually pretty old. This is an example of the kind of stuff that we look for. This is a big underground vault in a smaller development. This one's only about 140 houses or something like that. But this giant vault underneath here, it's what, 25 feet by 80 by 150,
Yeah,
something
the
like that.
concrete vault.
It runs down this bank and down to an embankment that they armored up with a diffuser system on it. And it's like this, and it's just difficult. We've fallen.
It's like you were saying, hard to get to.
Yeah, we've fallen, we've hurt ourselves. I got stabbed in the leg walking down there one time. So having another way to view what's going on in areas that are hard to get to is really beneficial. So how many people here have environmental permits? There we go. There's a couple. I got a whole list of them up here. Capital projects. You ever work with core permits? Anything shoreline, boatyard, federal, wineries, the vineyard permits, industrial permits. Any of these things, a drone program can be very beneficial. I just put that in there to see if people actually read it. Could be beneficial to you for application. So I didn't see as many hands as I thought I would for that one. I figured most of us here would have had some kind of a touch in with regulatory, but that's good to know. So if you have questions, I'll try not to dive too much into acronyms, jargon, and other stuff if that's not your field. Yeah, so go for it. So we go for all sorts here. Our big focus again is on public works applications and some with DCD, but we'll do aerials of utility installations. If it's a fast moving project, sometimes it's nice to get a run to see how they're making progress. Regulatory compliance, that's our basically the bread and butter for us. We get construction stormwater general permits. We have industrial permits that we use these for, and our big one, the municipal permit. It's been really beneficial for construction inspection and other odds and ends, shorelines, outfalls, things like that. There's quite a bit you can do with it. We do some reservoir inspections for the Office of Drinking Water within our jurisdiction. We are a water purveyor, so that helps. For example, you get a proximity alarm or something, or a call that somebody cut a lock on a reservoir application.
We had that this morning.
You want to tell them about it?
Oh, just the typical call from a contractor, from a person that lives by the site saying, hey, they tried to break into your site last night. The gate's open, the locks are missing. So in the case of a reservoir, the question is, did they cut the lock off the ladder? Did they get in the reservoir at all? And then a protocol goes in place. That's not fun. Had to do it several times before.
It's a 1 million gallon reservoir. We have to drain it basically and
send everything.
Test for stuff.
Take it offline, send
Take it
everything for
completely
testing,
offline.
radiation, everything.
Yeah, so we lose a pretty substantial piece of our infrastructure if we can't quickly check to see if it's
In
functional.
the case of this morning, it sounds like from the phone calls that I got that they didn't get the lock on the ladder or the lid.
Yeah, it was
on the
just
tank.
like the entry gate to the area was tampered with, but all of our safety features, the barbed wire fences and everything, the locks were still in place on that. They checked the locks on the ladders, they checked the locks on the access ports, so it was pretty easy to verify that they hadn't gotten any further than that. But in the instance of using one of these, we just pull the truck up, put the thing on the ground, and you can fly right up to the top of the reservoir without having to worry about safety equipment, anything like that. Because if you're climbing that, you got to get tethered in. There's a lot of stuff that needs to go along with it. And I mean, it's a 2 or 3 minute operation that could have been, an hour plus to be able to do that. This was the big thing. We were getting a lot of this. And we were getting a lot of this at multiple sites because Port Orchard, at the time of this picture was taken, Port Orchard had 1 inspector. We now just recently have another inspector, but our inspectors always have slashes in their titles. So he's our GIS coordinator / inspector. Our new guy is our project coordinator / inspector. So
And our-
multi-purpose, multi-function.
When I first got to the city, I think we had a couple projects going on. I was inspecting, and our growth last year was 9%. So a lot of it's really exploded. It probably has for a lot of you guys in your jurisdictions. And so now having several sites, 100 acres plus is not uncommon.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, we've got a ton of problems with this facility here. It's not even functioning the way that it was designed.
And that's what I like. You can see from there, for any of you guys that have been to Cecil classes, most of them are going to tell you, you can tell the condition of the site by looking at the pond, right? So that gives you a good idea of what's going on that site.
So this is the same site. This is mud up to his knee on his ankles, hiking in the rain, going out and doing our routine inspections. Now for our construction, or for our municipal permit, we have a minimum of 6 months for these. We have to do them at a minimum every 6 months. That doesn't always work for projects like this, especially large spatial projects that are trying to open up huge quantities of land right before the winter time. And then they just come out to us usually and we're going to throw straw on it. We're going to throw grass on it. Well, we did that for a few years because that was kind of the way we always did it. Our growth rates have gone like this since I started in the city in 2015. And at the time when we were getting small lots, 5 acres or less, things like that, seeding and straw was working. We actually had to write it into our code. You can't use straw mulch in Port Orchard for anything larger than a 5 acre site. Hands down, it's not allowed. So anybody that's developing in our town always grumbles about it.
Tell them what the problem with straw is, though, what we were seeing.
Well, yeah, you go ahead, man.
Well, I think the ecology standard, we probably have a couple people from ecology in here, but I think it's 2 inches thick, isn't it?
2 or more.
Two or more inches thick. So if you're using a blower and you put straw out there, even if you can get the 2 inches, the wind blows, you don't have 2 inches anymore. It rains, it compresses, you don't have 2 inches anymore. So it's really kind of aesthetic to put straw out there and say, hey, look what we're doing.
Well, and right, and when they do it right, that straw is supposed to be bent. That straw is supposed to have geometry to it so that it helps to hold itself together. Most of this is just blown out and they're just getting rid of it, right? They have a big site, they got to cover a lot, and they are burning through bales. These guys spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on straw for 104 acres.
Cows were starving in Eastern Washington.
That was what they told us. They're like, we're
Yeah.
killing the product over there.
Yeah.
But they just kept doing it. And at the time we had no real pin because they weren't discharging from the site at the time. That was just using the BMP that hadn't failed yet. Even though we told them this is probably not going to work. They said, you guys, we're old school with this. We're professionals. One of my favorites, the kid that, the Cecil for this site, we come into the pre-construction meeting and they sit down and they're all high-fiving and everything. And, you know, there's this 21-year-old kid sitting at the end of the table, not saying a word, looking kind of sick. Because we're going into detail on what needs to be done, this and that. And he gets up and walks out and his dad's at the table. We didn't know they were father and son. And he goes, yeah, that's going to be our Cecil on this project. And we're like, well, we need the information for the permitting process, you know. And he's like, oh no, he doesn't have it yet. He'll have it on Tuesday. We're good to go on this one. He threw his kid on a 104-acre site with no training other than that 3-day course and expected him to manage. He was project manager and the season. So, right, that's what I'm saying. This happens all over the place, folks. We run into this in one form or another in all jurisdictions, and it's just really difficult to manage in many different facets. So yeah, we have to go out and do our minimum 6-month inspections on foot. We do them on foot every time. We fill out the forms, but we also have higher frequency depending upon whether the sites are problem sites or not. So we tend to turn around more. And when we're turning around more and it's not specifically required by the permit, we'll use the drones for that same type of flyover. We don't count it as like a documented permit inspection for a municipal permit, but it's there in case we need supplement for it. So we do, the frequency varies for us depending upon application, but with these guys, we were going out sometimes weekly during heavy rain events, doing that same walkthrough, getting that documentation. So including that UAV or drone in this really helped us.
On a site that we think's doing pretty well, if we think's in compliance, they might get one drone flight in the wintertime. But if we think we need to step up the compliance, they might be weekly.
Yeah, and I mean, for municipal permit compliance, we changed things fairly early on. It was 17 or 18, I can't remember the date. But Appendix 7 of the municipal permit, we don't use it that way. If they exceed 100 points on that Appendix 7 scale, they automatically have to design their TESC protocols to the 10-year storm, not the 2-year. So we just drew the line there. We didn't have enough people to be going out and seeing all this stuff going on. We had to do something. So we tightened down our procedures for this. And we tried to find ways to best use our time working in these applications. Again, walking is necessary for certain aspects of this, clearing limits, et cetera. But if we can supplement what we have with drones, we do. So yeah, volume growth was crazy. I mean, these last couple of years have been insane. And for us to convince our council to upstaff, it's really difficult. I'm sure many jurisdictions run into this because there's going to be a peak here and there's going to be a change. And do we have sustainable staff to continue this? So we needed to find something to buy us some time, which is why we started going down the route of looking for alternatives to just upstaffing. When I started here, I think we had 8 plat permits. We get hundreds of plat permits now, close to 1,000 building permits last year just for houses alone. Now we're getting a big apartment complex influx, bunch of other stuff.
Lots of apartments.
Yeah. So we're having to adapt to this as it changes. And this really helps us to keep that finger on the pulse of what's happening on these sites in between the regulatory required site visits and.
Well, this site here,
forms.
that's just a fraction of it. It was a 100-acre site. So you and me were out there all day, many times.
Yeah,
Where if you're just doing the drone inspections, that's a 10-minute visit and then onto the other site, another 10-minute visit and on the other
correct.
site.
Supplemental. Yeah, the amount of time needed to expect hasn't changed. So go ahead. We ask some questions of you for the first one. Have you guys been in any similar situations? Maybe a show of hands. I appreciate you for being brave. Thank you. You ever had a hard time justifying upstaffing?
Yeah,
Okay, I knew there were gonna be people here that have gone through this. Have you had to think outside of the box to continue meeting these regulatory compliance? Yeah, I need everybody's hand on that one. So yeah, UAVs may be very helpful for your jurisdiction. That was where we ran into the hiring more inspectors. The big thing for us was find a way to reduce the walking, the foot time. Because we still have to do paperwork, we still have to do follow-ups, everything else. So this is the approach that we took moving forward, was sustainable alternatives. You want to go ahead? So that was what we ultimately came down to. We don't need to walk it every time, but it doesn't substitute for those required inspections. I
well,
really
there are
want to drive
different
that home.
perspectives too. When you walk it, you get pictures of reels, pictures of VMPs.
Yeah,
You know, it's kind of a two-dimensional. So together, they all show the picture of what's going on there. And like Zach said, we're doing our regulatory compliance. We try to do it more often than 6 months. We try to do it like every 3 months.
right.
I think our engineers would like it every month.
Yeah,
And then this we can do weekly because it doesn't take a lot of time. And it's a great thing to send out to your directors, general managers, whatever you have, and say, "Oh, this is what I'm seeing out there." It doesn't take a half an hour for them to watch it. If you keep your video size down to like 5 minutes and you just fly the site fairly quickly, doesn't take a lot of time out of their day. Easier than having the meeting with them about a site that
Yeah.
can take 45 minutes or an hour.
yeah, you can customize the length based on the geometry of your plat that you're flying. I mean, you'll find a route pretty easily with this that really maximizes that time efficiency. But so we had to sit down and talk about how this wasn't going to be expensive, how it's going to improve our productivity, how it's going to improve our developer satisfaction, which is very difficult when you're a regulator, and keep it transparent for code enforcement. They were all over it. It was simple. We just laid it all out to them. This is where we're at. This is where development is. We need something. This is our proposed alternative to get us through to where we can determine if we can upsell it. And they said, yeah, that thing's cheap. $1,800, go buy one. Go ahead. So now what? We got this thing sitting here, right? Do we have to, so we had to start doing a bunch of research. Like, what do we need to do to be able to implement a program to do this? Well, we heard that there might be a license requirement for this. So we started diving into what is there that needs to be done. Either hire or train a pilot, develop a policy, and find a drone that makes sure that you can get one that does what you need it to do. If you're looking for survey, you need to spend a little more money. If it's just photography for regulatory compliance, you can really reel it back. Ours was, I think, 1,800.
And then I think the price has come down a lot. That was like almost 4 years ago that we bought ours.
Yeah. So policy is really important. Do you have our policy out there?
Yeah, that's right.
It doesn't
here.
take a lot of space, pretty small binder for.
And I don't know if
speaking.
you all have a policy, but I think we could share ours via
Yeah.
email or something.
Yeah, we've got it, and we'll get it all in the link if you guys are interested in reading it. They're really pretty straightforward and simple. It's just, I will do this while I'm doing that and be wary of this.
It's right here in our McDrone 1.0 Born to Fly folder.
That's right. So yeah, privacy policies are important with this too. You need to know where you can and can't fly, et cetera. Limitations of use, another big one, like I said, with the police. And everybody's gonna want to do it a little different. So you're gonna need to tailor it specifically to your jurisdiction if you want to implement this.
And people, you know, the public, not all of them are drone friendly. So I think I try to keep in mind,
It's a nice
I
way
try to
put
keep
it.
in mind what is a reasonable expectation of privacy, right? The guys, you're doing a site like one of the ones we showed earlier and there's a fence up. Maybe he doesn't want you flying over his fenced in yard. He might have a reasonable expectation of privacy. You're flying down a city street. There's not really a reasonable expectation of privacy, right? So just try to keep that in mind if you're using one of them. That's how I see it.
And our attorney approves. So this is a link to the FAA pilot section on what to do. This is a basic image of their license that you get. Part 107, do you want to talk a little bit specifically about that? Can you click forward one? I can't remember if we go further into 107. No, go back it up. Just tell them about your experience when you went through and how you ended up getting through it and getting certified.
So has anybody in here done the research on drones recently? The online one?
Not the research, but the initial license.
Yeah, the research I think is a little easier, but it seems like they've lightened up on some things, like they allow you to fly at night now, but they're also, come September, and this is an older drone. I don't know if DJI is gonna update the firmware, but you're gonna have to have some kind of transponder on your drone, so that people can see what it is and what it's doing there, right? There's always a few people that screw it up for everybody. The drone's flying over the football games, whatever, right? I think to not have a transponder now, you have to be under 1/2 pound and the propellers have to be covered, at least for flying over people. And so part 107, for those of you that don't know, if you're making money with the drone, you're flying for a city, then you're going to need to be a licensed drone pilot. If you're just flying one recreationally, say, hey, I want to buy a drone that looks like fun, you don't necessarily have to be part 107 certified. So because we're a city, somebody had to go down and get the licensing. And for me, I'm not saying it was the right way, but I did take an online class. I'm a mapping guy. There's a lot of mapping in the test. It's kind of from a pilot's perspective, right? For those of you that have done it, you know, you got to put a little time in on the mapping part of it. I didn't get a lot out of the online training that I took. I don't know what you guys did. So I did what most people do and go to YouTube, right? And there's a couple of good videos on YouTube. Tony something is one of them. This is like 2 hours long.
Yeah.
Watch that a couple of times. There's a couple of them on there. If you look at part 107 on YouTube.
And if
They're
you're
about
interested, let us know. We can get that information.
Yeah, we
out
can
to
send you the
everybody.
links. If you watch that a couple times, I'd say the average person is going to have no problem going down and passing that test. He breaks it down. There's a couple guys on there that break it down into small segments on the map. And when I went in to take my test, I came out and said, hey, I got my glasses on and I can't see what's going on here. Some of you guys are probably my age or you need glasses now. And they brought me out a layover that was kind of a magnifying thing. And then I could see the map and I had a chance at least. But yeah, don't be intimidated by it. If you're thinking about going and taking the test, I'd highly recommend watching a couple of YouTube videos. The insurance pool was not amused. I probably should have lied to them when they said, how did you pass this test? And I said, I watched a YouTube video.
That's kind of why we were hoping to have them talk about that.
But that's what happened.
Yeah, because our police department went through the in-person training. It was days, hundreds of slides on a PowerPoint. And they came to us afterwards and they were like, you guys passed that thing?
Yeah, apparently none of them passed. And they said, how did you, they said, how did you pass? And I said, I watched a YouTube video. And they go, no, really?
And they brought that packet. It was giant, all this stuff, and they dove so far into the minutia, they lost their audience. So this was really helpful for somebody to get the better big picture on it.
It's mostly to know what the airplanes are doing, and mostly you're in their territory, so you're learning what they're doing.
Yeah, but the weather report part of it, you have to read the weather reports, right? Like I can get my phone out and read a weather report. I don't need whatever that was they taught, but you need to be able to know it in order to pass the test, just long enough to pass it. Yeah.
As for the YouTube, comment, just think Goodwill Hunting in the bar scene.
Fair.
Yeah.
It's like, you
Fair.
spend $1 million, you spend thousands on an education when you could have just spent like a couple cents at the library.
Excellent point. Yeah, that's true.
You wanna move it?
Yeah.
So documentation, for flight documentation, it's really important. You're gonna see us go through it out here in the field. He's gonna have everything set up. I'm probably gonna just walk around and help him. That's kind of what I do. I just follow him around and help. If needed prior authorization, we're in the middle of Militaryville over where we're at. There are several jurisdictions that are very close to that, so.
Do you guys use any, I started out with AirMap, I think, and then it quit working for a while. And I started using Before You Fly to get authorization in restricted airspace. Are you guys, is anybody using anything else that they could use AirMap? It quit working for me for a couple months there.
Yeah, working fine now.
Okay. I switched over to Before You Fly. So for those that don't know, it's just an app online. It used to be back in the day, you had to put in 90 days in advance to get permission to fly in restricted airspace, which our city is about half restricted airspace.
Yeah.
And the way that works is it's like an upside down cake. So
Wedding cake.
wedding cake, yeah. So right around the airport, it's pretty restricted by airport. Our airport, it's like 50 feet. And as you get further out, the tiers go up and out. After a while, it doesn't matter because you're above 400 feet. But out by McCormick, where we're at, if you're out on the edge of the restricted airspace, you could get 400 foot, 200 foot. As you get closer to the airport, it drops 100 foot, 50 foot. And as long as you put in your before you fly app or air map or whatever you guys are using, if you see on there that it's restricted to 100 feet and you put 99 feet in there, you should get approved. I've only been denied a couple times. I don't know what was.
Usually pretty quick for most.
Yeah, it's usually instant. Yeah.
We've
Comes
had
in.
some hiccups before, but
That was like they wouldn't let you fly for
we
a
were
day.
assuming there was an issue with the airport or some other.
Was it when Biden was in town? I got caught when Biden was in town.
It was something, but they never tell you.
Because
right?
no
You just can't
airplanes,
do it.
yeah, no airplanes were flying around. You're
Yeah,
like,
there were
I
no
can't
planes either.
get approval, but there's no planes, right?
So something was going on, but yeah, so my role usually with him is a spotter. I bring a pair of binoculars with me if I need them, or just really squint to make sure I can see where he's going if he's getting out in distance. But
And you
yeah,
can,
I mean,
you can let somebody else fly it as long as the Part 107 pilot is right there and can take control.
yeah,
Kind of like the old remote control aircraft thing.
yeah. So like we talked about in that other talk that we did, like Darren was saying about the pond, one of our big things is preventative with these. These guys, again, different site, but these guys, we just want to do our BMPs this way. You can't tell us not to until they fail. Well, that pond water's got to go somewhere. We got 2 inches of rain coming. What are you going to do? You can't just put more grass down. It's in your pond already. It's going to leak. Well, we'll plug it. That's my favorite. We'll plug it. Everybody says
That'll
that.
buy you
now. Well,
another,
they're gonna put a
that'll buy you
plug in.
another 2 weeks.
So they started plugging everything, and their ponds, when they were at design, were about 8 acre feet. When they plugged it, they exceeded 10. And the engineers in here know what that means? That's correct. So they inadvertently got damn safety called on them, and we had it was a big, fun, exciting visit because they had these things in tandem on hillsides, all tied in.
Trying to keep-
we had to get Department of Emergency Management in. We had to send out notifications downstream. It was, I mean, and we're talking 6 inches before these things go over, right? It should have never gotten to that, right? So
No control structures.
yeah, let's just say proper enforcement was conducted by all agencies involved, and the problem was rectified. That's.
If you work for an agency, if you work for a regulatory agency, one of your people was probably on that site in the
Yeah,
last
that's
couple of
fair.
years.
That's fair. It was a great exercise for emergency management, just saying. And we're really glad nothing happened, but it was close. So we got on these guys because they kept getting this water after they got their control structures in place. They were discharging this stuff. Because we told them, you're going to cause, this is human health issues. This is life safety. You can't do that. And so then they,
Ruby Creek was right there.
yeah, there's a creek that runs right here too. So this discharge point is here in the wetland right next to the creek. This one is one of the old ones that snuck through. This thing's been through permitting for over 12 years before I started with the city, and they finally got through much of their entitlement carried over. This was before certain court cases. So yeah, so they were dumping water into that creek. So we finally, working with other jurisdictions, got on these guys and got them to set up Kaizen treatment at their outfall. And they were able to link all their ponds into this one and managed control discharge to that receiving water at a specified rate and clarity of the water. So
If I remember right, that was 750,000 cubic yards of cut and fill.
yeah, that sounds about right. It was
And
massive.
For our city, that's a pretty big cut and fill job.
So rules are important. Make sure if you're going down the route of a UAV or a drone, check to make sure things haven't changed, because they have. Since we've been doing this, there have been several subtle changes that have occurred.
But the research's good for that. You're gonna get in there, they're gonna get you up to speed on what all the changes are. Some are good, some are bad.
Yeah. So was this worth it for us? Absolutely. It really, our code enforcement officers love us. We now have 2. We had 1 for the longest time, but we now have 2. this is very helpful for them because the photos can be admissible for code enforcement actions. The videos are usable as well. We don't want to jump straight to penalty. We tend to try and do stop work orders. You can't do anything but erosion control and site management until we figure out a solution to move forward.
I like to give them the shot across the bow before you really crack down with, like, at least have that communication. Hey, we don't think you're doing that well. Here's the regulatory paperwork that we filled out. We don't see it the way you see it. And I think those links to the drone footage, those little 5-minute Dropbox videos really help out.
Yeah, and it doesn't.
We've
hurt when
had,
you walk into a job shack.
I think we have, and I think the drone footage and the inspections, ramping up the inspections have really helped out. Currently, we have, I think, 4 sand filter setups with some type of Kaizen treatment.
Yeah, the end of this, probably after summer here, if you want to do any wet weather work in Port Orchard, you have to have some kind of a filtration or treatment if you're going to be doing wet weather work. We're getting it codified this summer because we just keep running into this. And
we also changed our code too. You can only open up 200 feet at a time if you're doing winter work.
Yeah, so from a development perspective though, let me give you the caveat. We're tightening down on a lot of this stuff, but we're coming to them on the front end with it. So we have actually had contractors say, thank you. If you standardize this for us, that we have to incorporate this into our bids, we don't have to do change orders after the fact. We don't have to go back and ask for more.
And the guy
that front load on.
And the guy that's unwilling to do it won't get the cheaper bid because he's aware that he's going to have to do this on one of your sites.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's conceptually going to be great. We'll keep you all posted how it works out for us. So this is another good example. Remember I told you about that steep slope at the very beginning of this? This is that pipe that was downstream. It's all keyed in and anchored, and this was bedded with geotextile and structural rock in this. It was a change in the depressional area that was agreed upon by their engineering team. This thing got overloaded and inundated, and these banks they're all clay banks, so it's slick, and we were falling all over the place trying to get down here. Actually got hurt. I don't know if you can see it, but
that's the creek at the top too.
This whitewater part here, this thing basically tipped like this because the rock failed here and it basically scoured in an area that wasn't clay. All the clay is kind of cut off from this area forward. And this is the second repair that these guys did. We can get an idea on how this is doing from the air quickly to be able to get on the contractor about repairing. Yeah, you can see this is another shoulder failure here from earlier, but yeah, it came down and
That was
through.
taken, if I remember right, like wintertime, pouring rain, breaking the rain. Hey, let's get the drone out.
That was
and
a
have a look.
7-inch rain event.
When that
in like 2 days
hillside
for
was
us.
like impossible to go down.
Yeah, it was.
Without a rope and some crampons or something.
We couldn't. Fish and Wildlife refused to go down there with us because it was too hazardous. The wind was blowing, there were trees popping around us, and we were able to get the drone up and get some imagery on this. Again, like I said, supplemental for the most part, but when it comes to code enforcement, this is very helpful. But so yeah, again, like I was saying about the pond here, this was that same day. Pulled a 192 out of their pond here and told them they had to fix it. And that's when they brought that kind of sand in shortly thereafter before the next rain event. Yeah, code enforcement really likes the program because the picture's worth 1,000 words for them. They still have to go through their processes, but this is something that we can do to streamline their work as well.
I'm just curious how many people go out and sample a pond and it says 190 on your instrumentation. And when you talk to the Cecil or the contractor, they go, oh, we're getting 21.
Yeah, right.
You guys get that?
We have to do sometimes side-by-sides with contractors where we split samples to just verify. And it's instrument dependent with turbidimeters. The more expensive your turbidimeter, usually the better they work.
When that happens, we usually volunteer to like come out and do a split sample. Like you guys go ahead and grab the sample and we'll use, because we're trying to help you, right? We want to help you calibrate your equipment or make sure that we're all reading the same sheet music, right?
Yeah, that's a whole other protocol for us too. We only use lab calibrated standards because they're defensible. The problems we've had are with hand mixed forms and standards. So I highly recommend using standardized calibration tools.
Yeah, and Zach's terrible to take samples with. He's got all this protocol. He has to have a certain way, dates and times and pictures.
Go ahead. So yeah, it really helped us a ton. It was actually really easy. The policy took the most time, really, well, other than the 107 certs. And I mean, the slide kind of speaks for itself there. So I've got an example video if you guys want to watch a flyover, I think on this site. And other than that, that's pretty much it for classroom. Do you guys have any questions while I'm fumbling with my
I
computer?
think for our city since we implemented the drone program and there was other things, not just the drone program, but I think our level of compliance in the city has improved greatly. I think all the contractors coming in and working are aware that we have a certain standard we're gonna make you meet, right? We're not gonna chintz on it. It's been painful and sometimes it feels like you're not making a lot of progress fast, but this was, of the last 3 years, this was the first year where I went, wow, it's really making a difference, right? We got some sites that are discharging 1 NTU as we speak out of some pretty muddy ponds. And historically, you treated all that on the front end, right? Source control. But there's some good options for treating it on the back end now. And if they didn't get good enough source control and they're working through the winter, then there's not a lot of tools left besides some kind of sand filtration and possibly chemical treatment.
Yeah. So like Darren was saying about Dropbox, it really makes a difference when you have the ability to just do Dropbox rather than trying to fumble with this stuff. So this is a pretty large development that's been phased into several different sections. So they worked from the north. They were getting work from the north up here and working their way south with the development. And we were running into problems again with BMP selection. And these guys bought out all the plastic in the area. I'm not kidding. They were trying to do the right thing and they just ran out of material. So they had to improvise and switch. So they started using mulch in areas, going back, and they did it right. They went back to the book and they started reassessing this and moving to try and make it better. But we were starting to have issues with this site. And it came down to, are you going to be willing to suffer through a stop work order and shut down any of the houses? Or are you going to
No,
try
they
to find another way?
did get a stop work order.
Yeah.
And it's a contractor I've worked with for decades, so I think they were kind of shocked, but times change. Do we have any inspectors in here, public works inspectors or people who do erosion inspections? So you run into those guys from like the 80s and 90s, like I know what I'm doing, blah, blah, blah. And I always try to tell them at the pre-construction meeting, look, times have changed. It's not the same as it used to be. Yeah. Oh, I've had that.
One of my favorite interactions with a contractor was when Darren walks in the door of their job shack, takes his glasses off and says, "Listen up, you melon heads."
Yeah. I like
And they all just kind of back up and
the other one I like is I'm going to start handing out real big fines, which I
Yeah.
can't. I tell them I'm going to start handing out real big fines. I can't, but
Yeah.
it works about 80% of the time.
yeah, if they know us, it's just kind of old hat, but yeah, I mean, you can see this is a pretty expansive site. I can't remember how many hundreds of acres this one is, but I mean, we're talking 400 to 600 homes in this area.
Success in having to minimize that interfering order to make them what we might do here.
So you're asking me a question. Can I just say, I'll say the word, and I don't want to get in trouble, development agreements. So this place started building in 1984, and every certain number of years, they have to revisit their agreements. And some of this was pre-LID, and it was pre-approved, and it was already permitted. So they sat on it, and within that window, state law, we get 3 years with 2 one-year extensions before they have to begin the project. So these guys are really good at timing, but from now on, everything's got to be LID for this development. Everything else in town that wasn't pre-platted and development agreemented, they're all meeting LID criteria. So this is the last of one of those old dinosaurs.
So that's why they cleared so much land.
Yeah. So we're right in, we're coming down the backside of that peak because everybody panicked with Sonos versus PCB and vesting. So all of our guys that had a bunch of money invested, not only was the market great, they knew they know what's going on, so they front loaded and pushed. And the market was good, and it's still pretty good in our neck of the woods. They haven't slowed down much. Some of the developers switched over to high density housing, which
See those channels there?
appreciate.
That's part of what got them red tagged, is these channels didn't have any check dams in them, or they're not lined. It was just conveyance. There's some check dams there, but a lot of these didn't have anything. And then they had punched in a 12-inch pipe right down there somewhere and kind of tried to hide it. And it was just some land they were going to develop in the future, but this contractor usually keeps me pretty well informed about what they're doing, and they failed to mention that.
Yeah.
And so you can see it right there where the trees are down, where the excavator went into the woods. There's
Category 2 buffer.
yeah, there's the pipe right there. I just saw it.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you're not supposed to discharge from the buffer.
That was why this high up, you have to put some down and there's something to do, so.
He doesn't, as long as he's under the ceiling, he can do whatever he wants. It depends on what the purpose is of the flight. Like for this one, it was more of a holistic overview of where
Yeah, and
things
I
are
don't know
at.
what the altitude's at there. It doesn't say, but I'm gonna guess that's like 100 feet or something.
Yeah. But this is again, close to the airport, so he's got that ceiling he's gotta be aware of.
Yeah, right there, I think the max might be 200 feet.
I was gonna say, it looks like about 200, typical tree level. is
Okay, yeah.
Around 200 is what it looks close to.
If we had the survey grade stuff, we could actually measure that.
Well, it does tell you when you're flying it.
Are you talking about that long elevation?
No, just the altitude on
The
your
elevation.
heads up screen. But
Yeah.
it has been very helpful. At the end of this one, I tried to put the drone in sport mode to fly it back.
Which
And
is fun.
it'll do about 35 in sport mode. There's a little toggle switch here and you have to get it in the middle. But I clicked it all the way into the turn off the GPS range. And it took off towards the airport. And that's when this home button comes in really handy. That's the only thing that saved me that day. Hit that home button and it flies the same path back. So I'm just trying to share that all of our flights aren't perfect. And so far we haven't had any crashes or anything, but if you get the drones, is that pretty standard nowadays for you guys that have them? The home button, and this one has sensors. This is like 4 years old, but it's got the sensors. So if you fly it towards the wall, it just stops. You can't fly into the wall.
Can't crash it.
Yeah, if you lose radio signal, it comes back the same direction that it went. That was pretty good technology. They probably have a lot better now. But
So no questions, huh? Okay, there's some questions. What are we starting that for? We'll use these for individual stormwater construction. So after the plats closed out and the home builders come in, they build them case by case. So we get the small lots where we got to do inspections too. If you got a row of houses and you can go pop, 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 pop over the top of it really quick, it's really useful for that purpose as well. To make sure fences are up, BMPs are in place, piles are covered, et cetera, foundations, you know, the usual stuff.
we've used them, like you said, for water inspections on reservoirs and tanks.
Yeah,
We've kind of thrown around the idea of using them for outfall inspections, like when the stormwater hits. But one thing I've really noticed, I don't know if Zach has, but I think we've made some huge improvements over the last couple of years. It feels like it's a never ending
yeah,
fight in the wintertime. But when I look out at the bay now, we're right there on Sinclair Inlet after a heavy rainstorm. I don't see the sediment that I used to see.
yeah.
It seems like it's always pretty clear when I look out there. So I think we've made some good progress, and some of that doesn't come from us. Some of that comes from, you know, the jurisdiction on one side of us or the other.
Yeah, well,
But-
it's a team effort, the jurisdictional boundary and everything like that. I mean, we work closely with our neighbors to try and keep them, you know, informed if there's something going on in the area. And if we notice something that might have been in theirs, we'll make a phone call, let them know, you know, things like that.
Outfall inspections, they're really good for, you can get out over the river and look back
Yeah,
to where you can't get, height to that spot or get to that spot. You can see it from different perspectives.
one of the big reasons we haven't used it for our shoreline outfalls is because usually with that kind of rain event, we're going to do more of these, so. Just one of those things. We use this, I mean, like I said, we use it for critical areas, buffers, things like that. I've got some colleagues that use them for wetland ratings and wetlands work, so they're really useful instruments across the board for anything regulatory. Yeah. Next question. Go ahead.
What department?
Geospatial, well, Darren, you kind of, I think that's another one of your departments.
I haven't, and yeah, I do, I'm the GIS coordinator for the city. I haven't, you mean like ortho corrected imagery or something beyond that? Yeah, the drones, this is a fairly inexpensive drone, but the, you guys were saying LiDAR drone. Can you, so you're collecting LiDAR with yours, and that makes a lot of sense to me. I see a lot of people switching that way because otherwise you're sending a crew out to do topo on a construction site. You guys are probably getting it what, half a day? Something like,
Yeah, we just did a lower canyon area. I could tell you how many acres it was, but total drone time was probably 25 minutes.
and then you have to post process after that.
And so we did that last week and I have the data to survey today.
But as far as like city infrastructure, like, I don't know what kind of AI you would need to say, hey, we did a flyover and all these are manholes and all these are water valves or something like that. Is that what you're saying, or?
No, I was just curious if like you found any.
I haven't yet. The imagery has gotten really cheap for us. And so we kind of have a deal with the local jurisdiction where we can get it for free now. And so back in the day, people were using, some cities were using drones to do their flyover imagery that was ortho corrected. Nowadays with the Part 107 and having to have your drone in line of sight without a waiver, I always thought it'd be weird too to send it up and be like, I hope it comes back. But yeah, I think, when they do the drive-throughs nowadays, some of you guys probably get your asphalt condition done by an outside source. And you have some deliverables you can do there, like ADA ramps. You can pick different things like stop signs, manholes. They can tell you a lot of different stuff. So I could see if the AI improves a little bit, or somebody has a package for that where you can fly a city block and then bring it in like you can. Currently, we use a data collector.
Yeah.
So we'll have a guy go out with survey grade GPS equipment and GPS the valves and,
Yeah.
manholes and catch basins and whatever. And we're still currently working on that, but I think it's probably coming with drones. Have you seen it done that way where they can collect infrastructure? Or?
No, just within my program, they that we did.
And GIS has changed a lot. I think I've been doing it about 15 years and it's changing all the time. You have to keep up with it for sure.
Tony?
Yeah, at WashDOT, I started using them in the wetland program, and we use drone deploy, which you can use with DJI. It connects to GIS and it creates ortho mosaics. It does all the post-processing for you, which is really nice. They just send you a link 30 minutes later, it's all done. So you don't have to have a supercomputer to.
So is that like set up your targets first, set up your.
Yeah,
control points?
so a lot of it is you don't have to fly. It's all automated, but you can set your polygons. You can tell it to do a combination of video or photos. You can repeat missions, so it'll do everything the same way
Exactly the
over
same.
time. And then what I want to try with our some of our stormwater BFBs is after you create a site or you just grade it and remove sediment, you can get volumetrics, and then when you come back and fly it again, it'll tell you a certain threshold of when you need to do maintenance activities to
sweet.
clean it out again, or it'll give you an estimate of how many more months you
Nice.
can wait until you need to do
When you
that.
could maybe even use that for loading from that area too. for
Yeah.
back calculations. That's cool.
Yeah, so and then maintenance uses it all the time to look at piles of this and that, and it's just a lot more accurate than the old ways of measuring. Just using the volumetric stuff. So drone deploy is nice, and you can send a link to anyone as well, which is really helpful, like you're saying with Dropbox.
Nice.
Yeah. What is the old saying? We are not the tip of the
Yeah, just
spear.
about the time we get done using the data collector and, humping it through town and setting it up and getting a point on each manhole, they'll come out with a method to go, oh, no, you just fly over it now. It gives you everything. It gives you the northern and eastern.
Heck yeah. Any more questions? We got, go for it.
I got kind of a combination of questions. One is, how much more expensive is the LiDAR drone versus the regular camera?
I got an idea, but look, you guys have bought them, so
Yeah, the LiDAR unit, did come down quite a bit. Right?
last time I looked, you were looking at like 10 grand for entry level to do topo anyway.
That's for photogrammetry. Step up the ladder, you're gonna be in the 70 grand arena. But when we do big projects, if you calculate the data we're getting versus the surveyor, we're paying for it in a couple projects.
Yeah. I got a friend right down the street that he does some of that, and yeah, his equipment's paid for itself really quick. He's on the private side.
We wouldn't go there.
I'm drawing a blank right now on what you call it when you're looking underground, for the pipes.
Ground penetrating.
Yeah, ground penetrating radar. I've seen some of that used with drones too. Have you seen any of that?
No, mostly those are the units that get on the ground.
Yeah, they have them now for drones that if you're looking for a gas pipe, going over the mountain or whatever, they can do ground penetrating radar with them. There's some videos I think on YouTube
Sounds
about
like
it.
it might be a safety issue in an urban area. I don't know.
Well,
When I was a kid-
anybody with old cities knows it's a mystery where some of that stuff is.
Oh, when I was a
And
kid,
I know the ground.
area, when the naval ships would come in, your television used to do this every time the radar dish went around. So, yeah, it's not hitting everybody, I promise. Yeah, continue, sorry.
So part two was, are you pretty much exclusively using the pre-programmed flight path sort of approach, or are you free flying more?
No, we just fly it. I've
Nah.
never tried to
He's
program
like
it.
Tom Cruise, he just like rams the stick and goes,
Yeah. And it's,
We have the ability to do that, it's just more time, and usually for us, pre-programming is great if you got something you want to see over and over again, but we were close enough with our photographic, we just kind of go the general path.
yeah, if you wanted to collect
Yeah.
I'm not sure about, can you get to a second elevation and tell it to take a picture the same angle every time? Like the
Yes.
You can't do it.
I've used it with one of ours where we've been over a year, the same picture, same angle.
Okay.
And it comes out pretty close, so it's pretty easy to do.
They're pretty useful and pretty impressive with what they can do.